your students need the things that I'm talking about today to thrive. I'm going to give you a little bit of context. So many years ago when I was in my graduate program, I was immersing myself in literature on student success and diversity. And I made a couple observations. One is that the literature on diversity was very much focused on these kinds of topics. There was a lot of campus climate research that was showing that students from marginalized populations were more likely to experience invisibility and isolation and all of these problematic aspects of what some people would call a hostile climate, particularly at predominantly white institutions. But one thing you'll notice is that that's all somewhat negative, right? And rightfully so. I mean, the evidence suggests, and there's quite a bit of it, that these are very real problems and that we need to understand them. But I was starting to ask questions like, well, are institutions doing anything right? Maybe not, but I figured I would try to see if I could find out. The other thing I noticed was that the conversations around success revolved around these concepts. Concepts of integration, involvement, and engagement. Now everybody in here is probably very familiar with these concepts, if not how they've been talked about in the theoretical discourse. I'm sure you're familiar with the reality that they are, for the most part, highly valued in higher education and talked about quite a bit. But if you look at the literature on these topics, one thing that's happened over the last 20 years is quite a few scholars have come out and critiqued these concepts for not meaningfully taking into account the role of culture and race and diversity in the conversation about student success. What makes an engagement experience a good or a bad one for fill-in-the-blank student, right? For a Native American student, for example. What makes it an experience that nurtures someone's passion for learning or actually alienates them from the campus environment? What makes a student of a particular identity group want to, wake up an hour early or go to a party an hour later on Saturday night so that they can get another hour in studying or doing work for a project? And these are important questions because we know that for students from marginalized populations, things like culture are very important. It's been pretty well documented. So one of the things that I did when I set out on my research agenda starting in grad school was I said, we need to complicate some of these conversations. We need to integrate diversity into the college student success discourse in some kind of way that is meaningful and useful. And we also need to figure out what institutions are doing right so that that piece of the diversity conversation is better known, because we didn't have that detailed or documented in the research yet. So over the last 12 years, my research team and I have conducted several hundred interviews and quantitative studies across many different research projects and assessment projects. A couple of years ago, though, I decided that I needed to create something that was more tangible. We needed something that better reflected students' voices and interests and needs. So I took a step back and created this framework, and it's called the CC framework for short. And there's 9 indicators here, and 5 have to do with what I call cultural relevance, or the degree to which the environment on campus is relevant to students' lives. The second batch, the last 4, is a set of indicators that I call cultural responsiveness, and they have to do with whether we're taking our understanding, our knowledge of students' values and norms in diverse communities and integrating that knowledge into the way that we structure and deliver support services. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into detail on each one of these, and I think you'll see what I mean by relevance and responsiveness when I do that. One more quick story. I think it was in 2010. I was at NASPA, the NASPA National Conference, which is the largest student affairs conference in the association of the country. And they had their conference at the convention center in Boston, the Heights Convention Center. And I lived in Boston at the time. I was working at UMass. And so one night I went home and left my badge there. And I went to the conference and I had to go to this award luncheon. And when I tried to get back in to go to my session, I couldn't get in. They wouldn't let me in, the security guard would. So I had to call the organizers of the conference and they had to come vouch for me. So I went to the session I was supposed to present 10 minutes late, which I think started things off on a bad note. Because when I got there, the audience looked really angry. And this was the only presentation, the only session I've ever come out of thinking that was ridiculously horrible. I have no idea what just happened in the session. What happened was I was presenting the findings for my dissertation. My dissertation was on 3 campuses that had high and equitable graduation rates across racial ethnic groups. And I went in to see what it was about their cultures that people attributed to this success. How were they fostering success among all of these populations when a lot of institutions had these huge gaps, right? And I presented the themes, and I remember looking around, and people were like, and I'm like, so what do you think? And they're like, we already know this. We do this. We need to get other people to do this. And so do you have any advice about how to transform our institutions? And I said, well, study wasn't on the transformation process. We do need to study that more. But this was more on where we need to invest our energy, right? And they're just and there were 60, 70 people in the room. And I came out and I asked my friend, I was like, what just happened in there? And he was being nice. He's like, it wasn't that bad. So that also stuck with me, and I said 2 things after that session, after reflecting. I said, one, I need to change the way I present this information. Because I know while all those people might be doing some of these things, that doesn't mean they're doing them perfectly. Neither am I, right? And so I started to start off, when I presented those findings, I started off by saying, if you had to identify the single most important element of a campus culture that fosters success among diverse populations, what would it be? And I get all these great, answers, and I'd say those were great answers, and those probably very important, but that's not what the research that I conducted found. So now we can start off in a place where we might all be doing great things, but this is about what are the 9 things, back then it was 4, but here it's 9. What are the 9 things that we should think about embedding in everything we do and investing our resources and enhancing throughout the institution, right? The second thing was I realized that my research was useless if we didn't generate tools from it that could be used, which is what motivated the creation of the framework and the survey that followed. So I'm just gonna briefly go through each one of these indicators. This first one is, that's not it. This first one is probably the most intuitive. It's cultural familiarity. As human beings, we all know that we find comfort in connecting with people who we share things in common with, right? So the research also shows that for students, being able to connect with people who understand them, whether it's faculty or staff or students, and who sometimes share characteristics with them, like racial backgrounds or coming from the same neighborhood, is really important, facilitates higher levels of engagement and belonging and success. The second one is cultural communities. Culturally relevant knowledge. And that has to do with the degree to which environments offer students opportunities to exchange and learn about, exchange knowledge and learn about their own communities. Now, when I talked about this before, one of the responses I've gotten is, that's not really the goal of higher education. The goal of higher education is to get people to go outside of their comfort zone and learn something they don't already know. And I say that's right, but those two things are not mutually exclusive. And if you are from a community that has been excluded from the history books, guess what? You don't know your own history, the history of your community, because you've never been taught it, and you've never had the space to learn about it. And engaging the different communities and the knowledge that exists within them that are represented on campus creates a diverse learning environment, which we know is very important in facilitating learning outcomes. Cultural community service is one, and it has to do with opportunities for students to give back and positively transform their own communities. And many of the students who we've talked to around campuses around the country have talked about this as being critical, because one of the reasons why they're even here, why they're in higher education, is so that they can have a positive impact. Usually it's for their community and for larger society. And if we don't give them the opportunity to develop the skills to be able to do that, then we're cheating. Meaningful cross-cultural engagement, which I've already mentioned briefly or alluded to. This one is well documented. After the first Supreme Court decision about affirmative action, the Bakke versus the University of California Regents, back in 1978, a lot of research has been conducted on this, because the Supreme Court said that race should be a factor that institutions can use in the admissions process, because constructing a diverse learning environment is essential for creating environments where we can maximize learning outcomes. Because when people are exposed to difference, to different cultural perspectives, their prejudices are challenged, and they experience all kinds of positive outcomes: cognitive complexity, openness to diversity, civic commitment, and the list goes on. And then the last one in that cultural relevance category is cultural validation, the extent to which campuses provide spaces or environments where students feel like they're valued or validated. So I'm going to transition to these last four. If I can just insert a side note. These indicators were very intentionally constructed, keeping in line with the theme of and focus on transformation. They were constructed in a way that they can be applied in environments throughout the campus. They're not something that the Chief Diversity Officer does, or that is the responsibility of Ethnic Studies faculty, but they're something that everybody can get better at if they choose, and if they care about student success. I sometimes say that those first five often manifest more in academic spaces, like classrooms and maybe co-curricular spaces sometimes. And these last four are more about support structures, but that's not to say that people who are in support services cannot provide culturally relevant environments. And teachers cannot provide culturally responsive support. I think they can. So I just wanted to point out that the first set is not confined to the classroom, and this last set is not confined to support. But to go into a little bit more detail on that second batch, so collectivist cultural orientations have to do with the degree to which campuses have cultures that foster community and collaboration are based on things like teamwork and mutual success. A very salient example that I like to share of this and the way this has played out is back in the 90s, there was a researcher, a math faculty member as well, named Yuri Treisman, who taught a math course. And he observed something over the years that made him ask questions. He observed that the black students in his math classes were not doing well, and the Chinese students in his classes were. He said there must be something going on here that's leading to this disparity. So he decided to study these two groups, and what he found was that Chinese students were studying in groups. They were studying collaboratively. The impact that that had was that when they encountered a really difficult problem, they were able to vet it and go back and forth with their peers. And when they couldn't find the answer, they could conclude, okay, this problem is difficult enough for me to go ask the professor for help, and I'm not going to look like an idiot, right? But the black students did not study in groups. They were studying in isolation, and they didn't have the same kind of support. So they may have attributed their failure to answer the question to internal deficiencies, to being underprepared, and they didn't want to reinforce stereotypes about black students being academically inferior by going and seeking help. So what he did was created a STEM program that was all based on collaboration and mutual success, and the success rates of his black students skyrocketed. Proactive philosophies has to do with the extent to which we do not just offer services, but we make a proactive effort to make sure students are aware of what services are out there, and sometimes even push them to take advantage of them.